Divided by borders, yet united by culture, Ethiopia and Eritrea share a deep, intricate bond, but they're locked in a cycle of rivalry and mistrust. Why do two nations with so much in common remain so divided? On the surface, the connection between Ethiopians and Eritreans, especially in border regions, seems unbreakable. They share language, customs, and generations of intertwined history. So what could have built such a high wall between them? Beneath these cultural ties lies a deeper story of political and historical conflict, one that will reveal surprising reasons for their lasting division. The Eritrean fight for independence began long before the Derg regime took power, as Eritreans pushed against Ethiopian imperial control. But in the 1970s and 80s, the brutal Derg regime intensified the oppression of both Eritreans and Ethiopians, further fueling the desire for liberation. This common enemy enabled one movement, the EPLF, to grow and gave reason for the creation of a second powerful movement, the Tigray People's Liberation Front. Both movements fought side by side against the Derg. But here's where things get interesting. These two groups, once united, grew apart. But why? What caused a rift within what seemed like a unified front? When the Derg regime finally fell in 1991, the differences between these groups fully emerged. Eritrea gained independence under the EPLF, while the TPLF rose to power in Ethiopia. Eritrea wanted complete sovereignty, but Ethiopia, now led by the TPLF, envisioned regional cooperation with a degree of influence over Eritrea. These conflicting visions set the stage for future tensions. But how did this split actually play out among the people? And how did Eritrea's victory transform into mistrust? For many Ethiopians, Eritrea's independence was more than a political shift. It felt like the loss of a sibling. From the start of their struggle for independence, Eritrean leaders portrayed Ethiopians as oppressors, leading Eritreans to believe they were the enemy. But here's the truth. The average Ethiopian had no real voice in the imperial or Derg-era governments, especially when it came to the war. In fact, these regimes were as oppressive to Ethiopian people as they were to Eritreans. Both governments used forced conscriptions and brutal policies that killed millions of citizens throughout the country. So, while Eritreans celebrated independence as a hard-won victory, Ethiopians were left with a deep sense of loss. Has this emotional divide, rooted in shared suffering and historical misunderstandings, become an enduring barrier to reconciliation, even decades later? The rift deepened further with economic tensions. In 1997, Eritrea introduced its currency, the Nakfa, and proposed a one-to-one exchange rate with Ethiopia's birr. While this might seem minor, Ethiopia rejected the proposal, fearing it could destabilize its economy. This seemingly small disagreement escalated into a full-blown economic standoff, intensifying the divide and putting Ethiopia's long-coveted access to the port of Arseb at risk. The border soon became a flashpoint, but not in the way most would expect. A minor skirmish over the small disputed region of Badme escalated into a brutal 2-year war in 1998. Hundreds of thousands died, yet the official end of the conflict didn't resolve the real issue. Borders remained contested, leaving both nations in a cold state of hostility. Then there's the rivalry between the leaders themselves. Eritrea's President Isaias Afwerki and Ethiopia's Meles Zenawi, once allies in the liberation struggle, became bitter adversaries. Why? These two leaders, who had fought together, grew increasingly distrustful of each other. Afwerki saw Meles as meddling in Eritrean affairs, while Meles viewed Afwerki as uncompromising. Their personal feud became a reflection of the national tensions. But Afwerki's role goes deeper than personal rivalry. His approach to leadership is a key part of the Ethiopian-Eritrean paradox. Often labeled as one of Africa's most authoritarian figures, Afwerki has used the ongoing conflict with Ethiopia to cement his hold on power, framing sovereignty and political independence as central to Eritrean identity. Yet, if Ethiopia were to achieve lasting stability and prosperity, it could overshadow Eritrea, asserting regional dominance in the Horn of Africa. Rather than pursuing economic benefits that peace might bring, Eritrean leaders emphasize historical grievances, with Afwerki aiming to keep Ethiopia unified yet weak, a strategy critical for his survival and Eritrea's autonomy. By portraying Ethiopia as a perpetual threat, he justifies indefinite national service, trapping generations in militarization while diverting attention from economic hardship and restricted freedoms. This reliance on conflict to sustain his regime means that true peace with Ethiopia could destabilize his rule, as his government gains from keeping tensions alive. This manipulation of the Ethiopian threat deepens mistrust between the two nations, making reconciliation elusive. Could this strategy be the ultimate barrier to lasting peace? In recent years, the relationship has grown even more complex. The 2020 Tigray conflict reignited old tensions, with Eritrea supporting Ethiopian federal forces against the TPLF. Although the Pretoria Agreement of 2022 aimed to bring peace, lingering mistrust has kept the nations in a state of no war, no peace. Meanwhile, Ethiopia's quest for maritime access has revived old fears in Eritrea. Eritrea's refusal to negotiate on port use eventually led to Ethiopia's 2024 agreement with Somaliland for access to the sea. In response, Eritrea aligned with Egypt and Somalia in 2024, a partnership driven partly by Egypt's opposition to Ethiopia's Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. This alliance has further isolated Ethiopia, and Eritrea's collaboration with Egypt, a historical rival of Ethiopia, only deepens the animosity. For Ethiopians, Eritrea's alignment with Egypt feels like betrayal by a nation they once saw as kin. Could this new partnership with Egypt and Somalia cement the divide, or is there still a way back from the brink? The Ethiopian-Eritrean paradox remains, divided by borders, united by culture. Can their shared heritage ever bridge the divide, or are Ethiopia and Eritrea destined to remain locked in this cycle of unity and rivalry? Could there be lasting peace between the two nations so long as Isaias Afwerki stays in power? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to support the channel.